Okay, well, it's kind of a big subject. My interest in psilocybin mushrooms goes back about 20 years, and it's from my work with them that I've had these maybe extra synapses or these breakthrough concepts, and the psilocybin mushrooms have been my teachers, and observing how they grow in nature has led me to a series of mycotechnologies that has a dramatic impact on habitat restoration. And basically, I believe the mycelium is Earth's natural internet, and it's a neural net of the planet, and it's sentient. It's like an exposed brain, and so it's a mindscape of open neurons that when anything happens in the environment, is the mycelium that is able to react, and it can customize and articulate a reaction based on the type of destruction that is coming at it, whether it's chipped wood, whether it's a torrent, whether it's a flood, whether it's a nuclear blast for that matter. And out of this complex genome of fungi, we have enough candidate species to be able to respond in an intelligent fashion that will lead back to habitat restoration. And so my work with the psilocybin mushrooms gave me this first concept of the neural net of the planet being mushroom mycelium. And every landmass of the planet is covered with mycelium, up to a density of more than 1 mile of cells per cubic inch. Up to 40% of the mass in the forest is actually mycelium that's in the soil. These are the grand recyclers in nature, and as they break down large organic complexes into simpler forms, they release all sorts of nutrients that are beneficial to other plants. And 90% of all plants have fungal associates. It's a symbiotic world that we live in. And the problem that we've had is we've had a big disconnect with nature, and in the past 10,000 years we have now removed ourselves from our primal past, where millions of years we're in direct contact with fungi and knowing how to use them. And because of the chasm that's created from religion and society and structure and houses and our society, we're no longer a nomadic people, or even people who are living in direct contact with the woods. We have all these barriers in between us and nature. And the presence of psilocybin mushrooms, I think, is a way of nature calling out to us, giving us this new neurotransmitter material. Because when I ask the audience, how many people, when they trip on psilocybin mushrooms, get the feeling or the message that the Earth is in trouble, where time is short. What can you do about it? Stop destroying the planet. And 90% of the people raise their hands in the audience. And that message is getting through to everybody, and we need to act upon it. And the advantage of the position I'm in now, which is that I'm greatly honored to be a sequence of other experts prior to me that have led me up to this point where I can take the next logical step. The sequence and the expansion of knowledge we have right now is to make a huge difference in using primary saprophytes for restoring soils, for using them as microfiltration, for breaking down toxic waste, for the prevention of silting of salmon beds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These micro blankets can become a new pad of life that you can articulate and invite members of nature based on the mycelial components. So we are designing mycological landscape cloths that will invite in beneficial insects, which then will keep predator insects or insects that you don't want in your house or in your garden away. And we're working with this with increasingly greater orders of complexity, and it's coming down to a threshold of knowledge where we can really see a paradigm shift, and something can happen really good.
Yeah, you were saying that you managed to eradicate all the carpenter ants in your home, and that was excellent. And you also mentioned the example of using them to repair fish habitats, and that was really excellent. And then and also as a replacement for pesticides for a wide range of bugs and stuff that may be not so beneficial. And that's significant because right now pesticides are so harmful to all of us. These are all things that you brought up during the conference. And I also saw your use of the metaphor of psilocybin appearing in areas that have been disturbed as kind of interesting, because not only does it have that physical action, but also has that mental action in the mind, which is what you were describing before, and maybe a spiritual action. So not only does it converge upon disturbed areas, but it also inspires within us something that can help us overcome the disturbance that we're creating in nature. I want to bring all those points up just as reflections upon what you just said. And I want to also ask you, let me see, You mentioned spaceships earlier, and I was just wondering. So is there because I think I read something by you once, and it was about spaceships, aliens, and the sort of like how the mycelium sort of spread throughout the different planets, and maybe inspire us to even build spaceships.
Well, I don't remember exactly that, but I think that the mycelial networks are present throughout the universe. It's a basic construct of the formation of matter in the universe, as you saw from, and it conforms to string theory. And we look at the mycelial networks and brain neurons and the computer internet and its design going all the way out into the organization of dark matter. It's all mycelial-like. And I think there's an inevitable consequence of matter anywhere in the universe that mycelial networks will be generated, because it's a very logical consequence of cell division. When one cell wants to divide and mitotically reproduce, which is the simplest way, boom, it produces another cell. And then that cell produces another cell. Well, that's linear cells. And so I think this linear organization of matter with these cobwebs that then crosshatch and net in order to share resources and also to have resilience, is an inevitable consequence of the organization of matter will be such that we'll have fungi everywhere. And I think Terence and I became very good friends the last 4 years of his life. And what I loved about Terence is he would make fun of himself. He was very, very good about that. And so when I give Terence shit, he would laugh and enjoy the discussion. The art of discussion was more important than Terence than some of the concepts. But in Terence's concepts, especially about the interplanetary colonization of the transport of spores through the void of space, is absolutely logical. There's a preponderance of evidence now strongly supporting that. He is probably absolutely on his mark about spores traveling from other planets. We are the recipients of an enormous amount of germplasm, probably in these very, very protonucleic sequences. But nevertheless, that starter material, is flying through the cosmos, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think Terence was right on the mark.
That's excellent. Now, you also mentioned polypores. This is pretty interesting to me, and they have various medicinal uses because they extract alkaloids or some other substances that may be medicinal from the bark of trees?
Many of them do, such as the birch polypore. Piptoporus betulinus concentrates betulin from the birch bark. And birch bark tea, of course, is well known to be very good for the immune system. And so there are many fungi like that. But the woodconchs, in particular, concentrate many of the active constituents that are present in the bark, especially those which are polysaccharide-based. Then there may also just be not a concentration, but a equal reflection of the amount of constituents of other types. But nevertheless, the advantage that the woodconchs afford is that they're a supportable medicine. You don't have to cut down the tree. You can just take off the conch. And if you have active constituents in that form, then it's easier to carry. Also, many of these woodconchs were absolutely essential for transporting fire. 10,000 years ago, when we're living in these environments, if we didn't have a fire at night, we'd freeze, we'd die in a few weeks. And so the transport of fire was absolutely essential for survival. And the woodconchs were used as transport mechanisms because you can hollow them out when they're dry, pack them full of embers of the coals, and then you can carry fire for days. Wow. And since all woodconchs are edible, that's the other thing that people don't realize, there are no poisonous woodconchs. They're all edible. So if you crash in the mountains and you're on an airplane with a bunch of other people, and there's just trees and snow, and there's woodconchs on the trees, don't eat your fellow passengers. You don't need to, You can knock up a woodconch, you boil it in water, you can live for weeks.
That's amazing. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk to you about. This is sort of like a surprise to me, and maybe this is the first time it's been revealed publicly, I'm not sure, but you were saying that there's been some new research into the genetical aspects of the psychedelic types of psilocybin mushrooms. Now, you pronounce it differently too, which maybe you could pronounce that for me?
Okay, well, pronunciation, the correct pronunciation in Latin is only that which is said with authority. So, psilocybe is how American mycologists pronounce it. Psilocybe would probably be more truthful to the Greek, but it's an ancient word, and the original pronunciation is not well known. Psilocybe is preferred.
Okay, so now apparently this is going to be its own genus now, split off from its original genus.
What happened is that there's some DNA work that's been done just recently in the gene sequence that gives rise to the enzymes that predetermine whether psilocybin or psilocin is present. Is such a distinct branch in the family tree of DNA that it can be conveniently sequestered now as a chemotaxonomic group very discreetly, and the DNA work strongly supports that. So very, very likely the new genus is going to be constructed and named, and all the active psilocybin active species in the genus Psilocybe will be moved over to this new genus, which will be a pharmacologically active genus.
And there's one last thing I want to say. Now, it's used for cleaning up what? It's used for cleaning up petrochemicals, diesel, and other contaminants. I mean, this is amazing. This could really revolutionize the problem that we're having with pollutants right now.
Well, these primary saprophytes are really great at breaking down wood. Wood is primarily composed of lignin and cellulose. And lignin and cellulose are chains of carbon and hydrogen atoms strung together in these large molecules, these super large string molecules, so to speak. And the hydrocarbons also have hydrogen-carbon bonds. So when the lignin peroxidases break the bonds of lignin, they also are breaking the same bonds that are present in hydrocarbons. So all organophosphates, all hydrocarbon-based toxins, whether it's diesel spill, oil, pesticides, etc., will be broken by these primary fungi. And so we can use them as healing allies in the environment and create these myco-blankets and do a lot to restore life on this planet, whether it's a nuclear blast for that matter. And out of this complex genome of fungi, we have enough candidate species to be able to respond in an intelligent fashion that will lead back to habitat restoration. And so my work with the psilocybin mushrooms gave me this first concept of the neural net of the planet being mushroom mycelium, and every landmass of the planet is covered with mycelium. The problem that we've had is we've had a big disconnect with nature, and in the past 10,000 years we have now removed ourselves from our primal past, where millions of years we're in direct contact with fungi and knowing how to use them. And because of the chasm that's created from religion and society and structure and houses and our society, we're no longer a nomadic people, or even people who are living in direct contact with the woods. We have all these barriers, habitat restoration. And basically, I believe the mycelium is Earth's natural internet, and it's a neural net of the planet, and it's sentient. It's like an exposed brain. And so it's a mindscape of open neurons that when anything happens in the environment, is the mycelium that is able to react. And it can customize and articulate a reaction based on the type of destruction that is coming at it, whether it's chipped wood, whether it's a torrent, whether it's a flood. Okay, well, it's kind of a big subject. My interest in psilocybin mushrooms goes back about 20 years, and it's from my work with them that I've had these maybe extra synapses or these breakthrough concepts, and the psilocybin mushrooms have been my teachers, and observing how they grow in nature has led me to a series of microtechnologies that has a dramatic impact on helium up to a density of more than 1 mile of cells per cubic inch. Up to 40% of the mass in the forest is actually mycelium that's in the soil. These are the grand recyclers in nature, and as they break down large organic complexes into simpler forms, they release all sorts of nutrients that are beneficial to other plants. And 90% of all plants have fungal associates. It's a symbiotic world that we live in. And